most valued invited dignitaries on the dais, worthy teachers, most beloved students and researchers, and all other dear participants who gathered over here. So there is a saying, an ignited mind is the most powerful weapon on the earth, above the earth and under the earth. And this is got through education. Education is the principal profitable investment for the near future. Knowledge management is a new emerging field in the academic environment. Department of History, University of Kerala is always in the forefront of knowledge management by generating and disseminating knowledge through various academic and research initiatives. This is what we are now doing for the last 2 days in 44 departments of the University of Kerala and 6 study centers of the University of Kerala. Researchers First 2023 is an academic and research initiative introduced by the University of Kerala for the first time in history for showcasing the research outputs of various departments and centers. So we are witnessing what are the items which has been displayed elsewhere. Science department, social science departments, humanities and the like. We are showcasing our outputs. And our social commitment also is a matter of concern. Yesterday, we have inaugurated some of the products of Khadi tribes, in which the Minister for SCST, Dr. Sri Radhakrishnan, has also been present, participated in this meeting. Department of Sociology has introduced a program known as OPPAM, a program by which the products of the tribal people are selling and they are marketing, they are finding markets and even online marketing technologies that we are using. University of Kerala is always having social commitment and our institutional social responsibilities. One of the major parameters for which we have got highest scores in NIRF ranking as well as National Assessment Accreditation process, in which we were, of course, got A++ grade with the highest grade point as equal to that of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. So with these few words, I would like to enter into the duty which is bestowed upon me. That's welcoming the chief guest and other participants of this program. Today is a very memorable day for all of us. An erudite scholar and social scientist is with us. It is my privilege to have been asked to welcome our most respected chief guest and other participants in the name of the Fraternity of History, University of Kerala. We are fortunate in getting the most deserving person to interact with our students and researchers, Professor Dr. Raman Mahadevan, formerly Professor Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He is an erudite scholar and academician. He possesses a rich academic track record. And speaking up to him in the morning, and what I should understand was that he has some connections with Kerala, was worked as for a long span of time in CDS, and also he was born at Chennai, brought up at Delhi, having connections with many of the states in northern India. His wife is from northern India and he knows Malayalam, and of course such a kind of versatile personality. And sir, we are so much proud to be with you in this morning, and I think sir, we are so much obliged to you for your magnanimity in accepting our invitation and reaching here on time in spite of your busy schedule and in this age of 74. And he has accepted our invitation. It's a very, very great thing, I feel. And dear fellow members, please join me in giving our chief guest, Professor Dr. Raman Mahadevan, the best cordial welcome. Welcome you, sir. So we are very happy to have with us Professor Dr. Shobhanan sir, my great guru and mentor, and as well as is very, very familiar to all of you. I think there is no need for any formal introduction, because he is, of course, in the academic field. His personality, his way of thinking, approach towards the people and students, and this kind of lucid mentality that he is always possessing. So we are very, very happy, sir, seeing you in this audience. And on behalf of this department, I welcome you, sir. Professor Mahadevan Khan, who is very, very dear to me, is very close to me, and we worked together when we did our research, visiting libraries, spending our time together, ate together in many other repositories, and we have been keeping these relations continuously, and he is very, very dear to me. And he is the person, none other than he is the person who introduced me this Professor Dr. Mahadevan, and it was because of his introduction that he accepted our invitation to come over here. And thank you, Dr. Mahadevan Khan, sir, for coming over here, and I welcome you, sir, to this audience on behalf of the Department of History. There are many teachers from, we have with me my colleague, Dr. Jinimon, Dr. S. Venumohan, Sajana is also here, and many teachers from Iqbal College, Srinarana College, Chembalandi, and several other colleges, all research colleges are there. And we have made it a point that we have to make the participation only for PG and research students, because he's an everyday scholar, his speeches and his conversation will be, of course, beneficial only to this kind of community, and rather than accommodating other students. That's why I'm very, very particular to that to this point, and we have reserved this accommodation only for researchers and PG students, and I think this is, of course, a good thing. And on behalf of the Department of History, I welcome each and every research scholar, each and every PG student, and any other person who is there in this platform and as well as among the audience. And I welcome you all with my single words. I can see many familiar faces, peers, past and present, and you are all very dear to us, to this department. Whatever the achievement that our department will make, it is the collective effort of all of us welcoming you all to this audience.
Thank you so much, sir. It's an extreme privilege and honor to have an eminent economic and business historian, Professor Raman Mahadevan. He will be delivering on a talk based on history of Travancore, industrialization, and Travancore capital, 1914 to 1950, a critical request. Prior to that, I will go with a formal introduction about our chief guest. So Professor Raman Mahadevan is a senior economic and business historian with over 5 decades of teaching and research experience in various universities and research institutions of repute, such as Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, Department of History, Rajasthan University, the Center for Development Studies, Travancore, and Center for Jawaharlal Nehru Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. He was also briefly associated as a consultant editor with Business India in 1990s. He was a visiting professor in an Institute of Development Alternatives, Chennai, between 2008 and 2013, where he was involved in coordinating major research projects on child and migrant labor. He's retired, but at 74, he is still active with research and publication. He has made significant scholarly contribution to modern South Indian studies, especially in the area of industrial and capitalist development in colonial South India. From an initial foray into studying the roots of Pakistani capital, way back in the early 1970s, an interest which he revived while in Jamia Millia Islamia in 2004-2005, he chose to focus attention on studying the pattern of entrepreneurship in colonial South India, which was then a much neglected region of study. Through his detailed studies of entrepreneurship in Natukottai Chetty community, followed by those relating to Coimbatore and Tamil Nadu, and later Travancore, he has managed to bring South India into forefront of major debates on Indian economic history. In recognition of his contribution to this field, he was invited by the director, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, New Delhi, to organize an international conference on rethinking economic history, circulation, exchange, and enterprise in India, which was held at NMML 14 to 15 March 2012. Raman Mahadevan was awarded with the prestigious Baden-Württemberg Fellowship in 1992 to interact with scholars at the South Asian Institute, University of Heidelberg, Germany. Subsequently, in 1994, he was invited as a visiting professor to the Center for Modern Oriental Studies, Berlin, for 6 months to pursue his research interest in the area of Indo-German commercial relations in the interwar period. One of the outcomes of his research project by him was a comprehensive research paper entitled Wrangling Over the Colonial Indian Market, the Untold Story of German Commercial Presence Between the Wars. This paper was presented at the workshop on informal and everyday markets, modern histories of Indian business and entrepreneurship since the 19th century, University of Göttingen, Germany, between 18 to 20 in June 2014. He has attended and presented papers at several conferences both within India and outside. He has several publications to his credit in prestigious journals like EPW, Indian Economic and Social History Review, etc. He was the co-editor of South Indian Economy, Agrarian Change, Industrial Structure and State Politics 1914 to 1947. He also co-edited with Professor D. Narayana on Shaping India, Economic Changes and Historical Perspective, which was published by Routledge. His NMML occasional paper, co-written with Professor M. Vijay Bhaskar, entitled The Making of Non-Corporate Capital, has received critical acclaim. His forthcoming work as Fortune Seekers, The Journeys of the Natukottai Chettiars, which was published by Penguin Books. It throws new light to the complex historical journey that shaped the principal merchant bankers of South India. At the request of the resident editor of Financial Express, Chennai, in 2006, he contributed a fortnightly column, Past as Present, in the paper. These pieces on the contemporary period focused on major cities and towns relating the weight of their past on the present. He also has contributed columns to other magazines such as Outlook, Business World, and Business India. So we are extremely happy to welcome him to the dais. Thank you, sir. Before that, I invite Professor Dr. Shovanan sir for sharing his thoughts about the KU Heights, about the department, about the eminent scholars present here. Thank you so much.
Good morning to all. Of course, Heights 2023 Kerala University Researchers Fest. It is a very proud occasion as far as I am concerned. I am standing in the height of happiness because it is a rare opportunity, a rare occasion to see the academic excellence of our university, especially the Department of History. And today's our center of attraction, Professor Dr. Raman Mahadevan sir. Of course, he is a gem of a man. Of course, he is noted for his valuable contributions in the realm of economic history, with special reference to commercial and industrial history. And of course, he was here in Center for Development Studies for several years, nearly more than a decade. And he was very much connected with the department during those days. And our students, our researchers, they used to visit CDS for the research activities. And our some of the senior teachers who are sitting here, they are also very much familiar with Professor Mahadevan sir. But still, he continues his research. As we had, his forthcoming work on Natukottai Chettiars. That is one of the emerging areas, most important areas as far as economic history of South India is concerned. There is a very model community. They are noted for their contributions in the realm of education, in the realm of industry, especially economic transactions. Even in the very early days, they used to run a university, Annamala University, Karakudi, Alagappa University, several other important education institutions. Similarly, Tyagaraja Chettiar College, Engineering College, Madurai. Likewise, they award a number of prestigious institutions, and it is very pleasant. It is very happy to hear that. His that forthcoming work. He's a very senior historian. He's a senior economist. He's noted for his rich experience, and of course, the forthcoming work will be a great contribution to the realm of history. Similarly, the topic which is going to deliver his address is also very much interesting and informative. As Professor Shaji has rightly pointed out, she was very much attached with the city state of Travancore. He was having wider connections. He was born and brought up. His parents hailed from Srindra, and he was born and brought up in Travancore. His parents were attached to the designers Mahadevan of Travancore for their educational contributions. And such a great man. So, we are very fortunate to listen his learned talk on some of the hidden aspects of Travancore history during a very important period of economic crisis. And once again, I thank the organizers of the department, Professor Shaji, Dr. Raman, Dr. Ania, Sajana, and other my dear beloved teachers and students for coming over here and making the program a grand success. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Next, we would love to invite Dr. Imran Khan, sir, for sharing his thought.
Dr. Shaji, Dr. Mahadevan, Professor Shovan sir, Dr. Kabir, and faculty members of this department, research students, and others. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor to have Professor Raman Mahadevan here in this morning to share some of his important thoughts on the crucial period of the early 20th century of Travancore economic history. Yesterday we were interacted with sometimes, and from this private conversation I came to know that why there are such communities and caste organization have not entered into the specific economic activities, and what that part impacted a result, a kind of result in the economic history of Travancore. That was very interesting. I need not to elaborate that conversation yesterday, but I think he will explain this morning. It is indeed a privilege to be with us, Professor Mahadevan. I thank the Department of History for inviting him. Thank you, Shaji. Thank you, Professor Shovan and others. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir. Before inviting Professor Raman Mahadevan, I would love to request the audience for kindly switching off your mobile phones or put it in a
Gentlemen, lot of thanks, sir. Thanks for running.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, the students. I'm now a very dutiful grandfather looking after my granddaughter, who is a special needs child. So I take her for all the therapy. So then hardly, I'm not very mobile. I don't move out of Bangalore. So since I received this invitation and I hadn't come to Trivandrum, it's my second home. So I thought I would come, and my wife said, yes, you go, I will take care of your, whatever you do, I shall do. You go for 2 days. So that's what brought me to Trivandrum. I'm truly overwhelmed by the warmth and generosity shown by Professor Shaji and this entire team, people associated with him. I'm deeply touched that Professor Khan has taken the trouble and Professor Kabir has come all the way. I mean, I was going to visit him later in the evening because I can't come to Trivandrum and not see Professor Kabir. So, but I'm really touched. So let me start. This is not a, I don't want to overburden you with a typical PowerPoint presentation which has all kinds of data and this thing. It's a very simple PowerPoint where I'm just showing you maps, you know, to give you some idea of the, take you back in time to the Travancore or to the India that we were concerned with or that we're going to be discussing about. So that's the only purpose of this. So anyway, let that map be there because that will, I think, make my job of presentation much more convenient because it will provide the appropriate historical context about what I'm saying. So let me at the outset thank Professor Shaji, Dr. Shaji, head of the History Department of the University of Kerala, as well as his esteemed colleagues and the students and research scholars for inviting me to be here and to share my thoughts on the special occasion of Researchers' Fest 2023 of the University of Kerala. I deem it an honor to be here in your midst on this very special occasion. The University of Kerala is undoubtedly among the top universities of India and has achieved considerable glory and fame in various fields of research and teaching. The Department of History is a reputed, venerable old department and acknowledged for its major contribution in enriching our understanding of Indian history. A galaxy of eminent scholars such as the late Professor T.K. Ravindran, the late Professor K.K. Kusuman, Professor Shovanan, who is here with us, Professor Vasumati Devi, Professor Satish, among others, have helped in shaping and providing character to the department. The department also enjoys the special distinction of regularly bringing out two very prestigious journals, namely the Journal of Indian History and the Journal of Kerala Studies. It gives me great pleasure to be here in your department and to be able to interact with vibrant young minds. The theme that I've chosen to talk about, namely Travancore's industrialization and capital, the theme that I've chosen to talk about, namely Travancore's industrialization and capital, is vast and complex. And given the positive time, it's best that I outline the broad contours of this theme. It's an area which still awaits a lot more research, and we'll be very happy if any of the students here, would consider working on various aspects of Kerala's industrialization as part of their doctoral research. The few studies that have been undertaken so far, both published and unpublished, provide useful insights on our understanding of industrialization in this region. These include the studies of Thomas Isaac and Michael Tarakan, K.T. Ramohan's unpublished PhD thesis, one of the finest pieces of work, and I've been persuading Ram to publish it soon so that all the scholars will have access to the book. Right now, you have to visit the CDS library or Kerala University library to gain access to the book. K. Ravi Raman's work, Tarian George, and B.A. Prakash's work, and my own work in a small way, among others. The initial major thrust towards research inquiry into the historical roots of Kerala's industrialization was interestingly triggered by research by economists who were concerned with the problem of Kerala's industrial backwardness in the immediate post-independence period. The debate veered around pinning the problem of industrial backwardness and inefficiency to factors ranging from labor militancy, high wage cost, low productivity, to weak links in the production structure itself. It was this which prompted a section of historians at that point of time to jump into the debate and try and see whether history can shed any light to this problem. In the historiography of Indian industrialization and entrepreneurship, some regions such as Western India and Eastern India, by virtue of being principal commercial centers, and also by virtue of the fact that they were large and more visible, received disproportionately greater attention than other regions. The southern region and the princely states haven't received the attention it deserves. Given the constraints of time, I shall not dwell into the process of the ascendancy of the English East India Company. The ascendancy of the English East India Company over Travancore and the latter's transformation into a tributary state. Following the establishment of British supremacy over Travancore, there followed important changes in the economy. From mid-19th century, Travancore was increasingly drawn into a new phase of global integration and consequently was exposed to the forces of intense commercialization. Though administratively the princely states were distinct entities, they were not immune to the process of economic change. Like British India, the princely states were also drawn into the world market and were seen as sources of food and raw materials for the metropolis and as a market for the manufactured goods. The opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 was a game changer. Earlier, the European trading companies had to take this route to come to India. But in 1869, you can, I don't have to say it's self-explanatory. I mean, you could reach Mumbai in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. This used to take 6 to 8 months. So that had very significant implications for, for the Indian economy in terms of, the effectiveness, the penetration and reach which the metropolis could make into the Indian economy, Travancore included. All this laid the basis for the enclave pattern of development of, the opening of Suez Canal was a game changer by significantly cutting down costs and transit time in transportation. It hastened the process of colonial integration of Travancore and other parts of India. Transit time reduced from 5 to 8 months to a few weeks. All this laid the basis for the enclave pattern of development of Travancore, characterized by the channelization of private foreign capital into plantations, initially coffee, and later tea and rubber, and also into agro-processing industry, principally coir. So the industrial structure of the region continued at least till the late 1930s to be characterized by the predominance of the export-oriented plantation and agro-processing industries. The data on export trade bears this out. Thus, as a percentage of value of total exports, coconut and its products, plantation crops, coffee, tea, and rubber accounted for 80.4 in 1870, and even as late as 1938, it represented 82% and 85% even in 45-46. That shows the importance of the plantation and agro-processing crops, products of the agro-processing industry in the total export basket. Prior to the 19th century, the products which were exported included, ginger, turmeric, pepper, and cardamom. And rice. Rice was also exported in the mid-19th century, early 19th century. But from mid-19th century, the major change that happens is, as a result of the colonial intervention, is the change in the character of the export items. Two broad phases of industrialization are discernible insofar as Travancore is concerned. The first phase, extending from mid-19th century till about 1930, was marked by the predominance of plantation sector and the agro-processing industries, namely coir, oil, and later cashew. These are the principal products. And much later, around the 1920s, you have some investment in textiles, some investment in sugar, and some attempts to invest in paper. There are not very many industries, just a few of them. The second phase during the 1940s saw the rise of the capital-intensive, high-technology modern industries such as chemicals, rayons, aluminium, cement, and titanium. So these are the two very clear, distinct phases in Travancore's industrialization, the period from mid-19th century till 1930, characterized by the dominance of plantation and the agro-processing industries. And the second phase, starting from late 1930s, but more in the 1940s, characterized by the entry of non-Malayali capital, that's another significant which I'll talk about, and capital-intensive, technology-intensive industries like Travancore Cements, FACT in Alvai, Travancore Cements in Kottayam, and Travancore Rayons in Perumbavoor. All these were very major industries which provided a distinctly different character to the industrialization process. While the first phase was marked by the dominance of the foreign capital in the plantation sector as well as part of the agro-processing sector in the form of expatriate coastal firms. These were Scottish foreign-based managing agency companies which were operating not merely in Travancore but were also operating in Cochin, which was an independent state, and then Malabar, which was part of Madras Presidency, as well as in Tamil Nadu. So there are names like Aspinwall, Lara Smail, Piers Leslie and Co., and a few others, William Goodacre. And then on the other hand, you had multinational trading firms, trading and manufacturing firms, whose sort of reach extended beyond India. I mean, they were operating in Southeast Asia, they were operating in China, and they were operating in India. So, Ceylon, and various other colonies. These included firms like Harrison and Crosfield and Volcarts are two good examples of these multinational, very large companies which had investments all across the world. The European dominance over the industry, especially coir and to some extent cashew, was buttressed, as well as cashew, was buttressed by the control over baling presses and the channels of trade, namely shipping and insurance, markets and credit. In fact, one of the major problems that Travancorean capital faced, and at this stage I must mention that one of the unique features of Travancore was, and possibly to some extent Mysore as well, was the absence of a trading caste, a Vaishya caste in Kerala. I mean, you had, Tamil Nadu had a number of Vaishya castes, and so did Andhra, but the absence of Vaishya caste was a significant noteworthy feature of the modern history of Kerala, and what its implications were for the development of Kerala is something which needs to be looked into. That the void created by the absence of the merchant caste was filled by Eidavars, by Syrian Christians, and the Muslims and the Muslim traders. So they made up for the absence of a Vaishya caste by discharging the role as traders. In fact, I would argue that the inadequate access to market intelligence and credit may have hampered and curbed the entry of indigenous capital in larger numbers than what you see. But despite that, the entry of one of the significant features in this period between mid-19th century and 1930 is the very significant entry of people from the Syrian Christian Eidavars caste into trade and manufacturing, whether it's coir. You see a very significant presence of Eidavars in the coir industry, initially as middlemen traders, because there was such a significant exponential growth in the demand for coir mattings in Europe that the European factories were unable to meet that demand from their factories. So the surplus demand was met by the Indian Travancorean establishments, coir factories, which sprung up between the late 20s and 30s and 40s as well. However, the specific nature of the production process of this industry, namely its spatially decentralized character, created conditions for the rise of middlemen and traders. You see, this is the specificity of the industrial structure itself gave rise to the emergence of Edavars and other castes. Because coir, for instance, was a highly decentralized and spatially displaced sort of production process, because it was spread all across the hinterland of Travancore, and rather than concentrated in only the final sort of process of manufacturing happened in Alleppey, but all the other processes preceding the pre-yarn stage and the production of yarn happened outside in smaller outlets, smaller units dispersed all over central Travancore. However, the specific nature of the production process of the industry, namely its spatially decentralized character, created conditions for the rise of middlemen traders and petty capital, largely from the Edava community, but also at a later stage from among sections of Kachi Bhatia, Tamil Brahmins, Syrian Christians and Nayars, because I have looked at the social composition of the ownership of these units which came up in the 1920s and 30s. Though they are not very significant, you see some Tamil Brahmins also, possibly from the Mangombu region, because they were moneylenders, so they may have had surplus capital, and perhaps they saw that the returns from the coir industry were profitable, so they chose to invest in the coir industry. So you have some Syrian Christians also setting up units, and a few Nayars as well. Till the 1920s, the Travancorean entrepreneurs were mainly subcontractors and middlemen, meeting the excess order of European firms. This is borne out by the data on large-scale industrial establishments. Thus, Indian-owned coir factories, which numbered 3 in 1923, went up to 18 by 1937 and shot up to 59 by 1949. They accounted for 60% of the workforce as compared to 40% of the workforce which the Europeans accounted for. So this was the period when also the coir industry was on the decline, so the demand was also coming down. So with the decline of the coir, there are very interesting parallel developments happening in Travancore. You see the rise of cashew. So coir is declining marginally, not completely, marginally, but the decline of the coir is more than made up by the phenomenal growth of the cashew industry, largely concentrated in the Kollam area. The cashew industry, at least the processing of the cashew industry, again there are various stages in the processing of cashew, from the procurement to the grading and packaging, there are several stages. It was a very labor intensive and woman and child dominated industry. Both coir and cashew witnessed the presence of very large number of women and child labor. Again, it is an instance of cutting costs and saving on costs, because the wages paid to women and children was far lower than the wages paid to men. As it is, the wages in Travancore were low, but by employing women and children in very large numbers, whether in coir for various certain stages of the coir manufacture, especially coir yarn manufacture, and cashew, is one of the significant features of the early history of Kerala's industrial development. In the context of the rise of Travancore accumulating classes, apart from the Edava whom I've talked about briefly, there's much more to talk about, I don't have the time. The first phase also saw the rise of prominence of the Syrian Christian community. I mean, we can't but also talk about the Syrian Christian community because their presence in Travancore's industry, whether it's the plantation sector, whether it's the other sectors, the banking sector, for instance, was extremely significant. The first phase, that is mid-19th century to 1930s, also saw the rise to prominence of the Syrian Christian community from a base in commercialized cash crop agriculture and plantations. Some among them diversified into commercial banking. The business houses of Kandathil, that is your Malayalam Manorama Group, Maman Maple, and Chalaguri, represented by Maman Maple and CP Mathan. Chalaguri is CP Mathan, are two good examples of Syrian Christian entrepreneurship. The phenomenal growth of these two houses was related to profits derived from banks and plantation companies. In 1937, the Travancore National Bullion Bank merged to emerge as one of the major banks in South India. So much so that they, for the first time, went beyond the boundaries of Kerala, of Travancore, having branches all over South India, including Mysore, Madras, which was a major commercial center. So the Travancore National Bank had a very significant presence, and they seem to have done quite well initially. In the meantime, by discreetly extending support to the State People's Congress movement, it is said both Maman Maple and Mathan incurred the displeasure of the Diwan C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer. The latter, it is said, utilized both his official authority and informal personal connections in the Madras financial and commercial circle to destabilize the Travancore National Bullion vulnerable position. So there was a run in the bank, and people, obviously, rumors play a very important role even today through WhatsApp, but they used to play an even more important role in the pre-WhatsApp, pre-telephone era. So rumors were enough to, in a sense, destroy the credibility of the bank. So people began to withdraw money, and there was a run on the bank, and finally the bank was unable to meet the demands and collapsed. Together with the bank, many of the companies went into liquidation. That's another story, we won't go into that. However, the few companies that survived managed to pick themselves up, and the Manorama Group was successful in reviving and emerging strong. But it's interesting how sometimes politics can intervene and, in a sense, influence very basic economic and business decisions. This is a good example because Maman Maple chose not to come back to Travancore. All his investments in the 40s were in Mysore and in Chennai, not in Travancore, because after the 1937 liquidation fiasco, they didn't want to take the risk of coming back to Travancore. And then, of course, they diversified, and post-independence India, they set up this huge rubber manufacturing, which all of you heard of, car tires and motorcycle tires. MRF in Chennai was set up in the early 50s by the Manorama Group. The investment pattern of some of the other major Syrian Christian business groups, such as A.V. George, East India Agencies, United Agencies, is more or less similar. Investments in plantations and banking, they chose not to diversify. From the mid-1930s, there prevailed very favorable conditions insofar as investment in plantations in general and rubber in particular is concerned. Price of raw rubber began sharply increasing from mid-30s following the enactment of the International Rubber Regulation Agreement. There was an upswing in the internal demand for rubber following the entry of multinational rubber manufacturing companies, CH, Goodyear, and all these companies come into India. So there was great demand, and the Japanese occupation of Southeast Asia, and especially Malaya in the 40s, as you all know, they occupied Indochina, Malaya, Singapore, and Burma, and came knocking on the door, almost entered India as well. It disrupted the supply of rubber, further pushing up the prices of rubber, and the demand for rubber, and the Syrian Christian planters made a killing. They made a lot of money during the 40s. This was reflected in the boom in share prices of plantation crops. I'm saying all this because in the literature on Kerala's industrialization, as well as industrialization elsewhere, and especially with reference to entrepreneurship, it is often argued that because of political reasons, because of discrimination against Syrian Christians, the Syrian Christians, in a sense, there was a lost opportunity, so far as Travancore is concerned, of mobilizing Syrian Christian capital for investment in industry. Now, this is a counterfactual. As far as I'm concerned, it's a counterfactual sort of argument because there is no evidence. You can't establish this. You are assuming that the Syrian Christians wanted to invest in capital-intensive industry. Why? Why would they? Because, and this is where I feel that comparative perspective becomes very important. I have looked at very closely at the Natakoti Chettiar community. They are very flourishing. They made a lot of money, much more money than the Syrian Christians, much more money than even the Marwadis. They made money all across Southeast Asia. But they never invested in industry as much as one would have expected. You know, they chose to invest in banks. They expected certain rate of returns. I mean, in Burma, by lending peasants, they were getting returns of 12, 18, 20%. Of course, in industry, don't get those kind of returns. And then the risk factor in investing in industry. So why should we assume that the Syrian Christians wanted to invest in big industries? Is it not logical and rational to assume that, I mean, if they're making money elsewhere in plantations, it's fine, they would reinvest in plantation. Why should you expect them to invest elsewhere? So, another factor favoring investment in plantation was the relative ease in securing the necessary permissions from the controller of capital issues for registering companies. You see, 40s was the period when there were a lot of controls, you know. It was the kind of, everything was very centralized. You had to go to Delhi, you had to apply to Delhi for permission to promote a company. I mean, initially the state government had to forward your application, and then the center would go through it and then either approve it or not approve it. I mean, it all depended on various factors. So there was a lot of uncertainty. Investment considerations may also have been influenced by the prevailing market condition. Thus, the restrictions on capital issues, the difficulties in importing mill machinery given the high costs, and scarce foreign exchange. All these were important factors which weighed in the mind of businessmen, and Syrian Christians would have looked at all this. You know, obviously you had to import the machinery if you want to set up a paper factory or a sugar mill or any factory. You had to import machinery, and you had to have a sufficiently large pool of trained technical personnel. From foremen to workers. I mean, it's not like cashew or coir where you don't need where the skill element, you do require skill, but it's of a different kind. But when you're handling machinery, you require different kinds of skills. And then capital, raising capital, you know, whether long-term fixed capital or working capital, you know, for running the factory, you require a lot of money. So, that's the capital markets were underdeveloped in the. I'm talking about the period 1930s and 40s. So that's where people who controlled banks. Of course, Syrian Christian had the advantage that they controlled banks, so they could at any point mobilize. And likewise, the Chettiars had controlled banks, and they had their own private banks, so they could. So mobilizing capital was very critical for investment during this period. These may well have influenced the Travancore entrepreneurs from opting for a safe option. I mean, the point that I'm making is rather than look at discrimination, not that I'm not entirely ruling out discrimination, but should we throw all our weight in one factor, the political factor, or were there multiple reasons which may have influenced Syrian Christians? Possibly the Arabs were not in that position because of the fact that, and this is again very interesting, I mean, unlike other regions where, I mean, if you look at Tamil Nadu, if you look at Andhra or Mysore, where, and the Travancore case was very unique, the predominant sort of hegemony or the hegemony of the control exercised by European capital over channels of trade, external trade. I mean, if you wanted to market oil, if you wanted to market coconut oil, okay, you can produce coconut oil, you can produce oil, but how do you send it abroad? How do you send it outside Travancore? You had to, if you wanted to send it, I don't think there was a big enough market in India at that point of time. But if you wanted to send it Europe, then all the channels of trade, whether it's shipping, whether it's insurance, access to market, access to foreign exchange, all this was controlled by a handful of firms. So that in a sense prevented local capital from, you know, accumulating or growing sufficiently quickly. It hampered the growth process of indigenous capital. No attempt was made at this time. Possibly there are very many instances of people going outside the boundaries of, or at least at this period, of Arabs going outside Kerala to invest in other industries with an effort to, with an attempt to heighten the process of accumulation. So they are basically confined to Travancore, but to Travancore, the kind of restrictions which the Arabs faced was quite enormous, whether it was coir, whether it's even cashew. The marketing, much of the cashew product was exported to the US or Europe, and even the raw material, the nuts, initially in the 1920s when cashew production started in Kollam, the cashews available, the raw cashew available within the in and around Kollam and partly from South Canada and Wayanad area was enough to meet the requirements for the demand for cashew nut. But with the growth of demand in the 30s and 40s, Kollam and South Canada was not able to meet the demand, so you had to import raw cashew nuts from East Africa. So almost 80 to 90% of the nuts which were processed in Kollam came from Africa. So I don't think the Arabs had access to Africa. So the nuts were imported by some other Asian traders from some other non-Travancorean. So it was handled by the Travancore capital only when it reached Kollam. So the accumulative process again gets thwarted. So you could make, you could in a sense make money only from the moment it comes to Kollam and it's processed and sent back. And export is again outside, it's not outside the control. And then the foreign agents come in. So the point I'm making is all this hampered the accumulation process of the Travancorean capital, which needs to be factored in understanding why the Travancore capital did not emerge strong enough to be able to invest in major industries. That's all the point, small point that I'm making. Finally, I'll just wind up by saying that I talked about the first phase till 1930. The second phase of capital and technology industrialization is from the 40s, largely from early 40s till the end of 40s. And this was marked by the inflow of non-Travancorean capital. So the major spurt of entrepreneurial activity as well as investment in capital and technology industry was not exceptional to Travancore alone. And that's very important. And I've been making this point, I made it earlier also, I continue to make it, that it is very, very important to have a comparative perspective. Let us not look at Travancore in isolation from what was happening elsewhere. I mean, if you look at Mysore, if you look at Hyderabad, which are two large states, almost comparable with Travancore, or other states in central India, whether it's Indore, whether it's Gwalior, whether it's Jamnagar, so many states in northern India. So you see a lot of non-local capital, mostly Marwadis entering in this and setting up textile units because it was advantageous to invest in these regions because the production costs were low. Lower production costs, lower taxes, relatively low wages, lax labor regulations, together with significant state aid and patronage were crucial in inducing immigrant capital to invest in princely states. And to buttress my argument, G.D. Birla, one of the leading businessmen of pre-independence India and also post-independence India, whose grandson is Kumar Mangal Birla now, the Birla Group, attempt to initially promote, and this is a fact not much well known, he tried to promote Hindustan Motors, Landmaster and Ambassador car, those of you who know, they were the first company to manufacture car in India. They and Premier Motors, Fiat. So Hindustan Motors was promoted originally in Okha in Jamnagar. Okha is a port in Jamnagar state in Gujarat. And later, of course, he shifted it to Bengal, Calcutta, that's a different story. But initially, he promoted it in Okha because precisely for this reason, low production costs, low wages, state aid. So they felt that it was advantageous to set it up in Jamnagar in Okha. Likewise, the first textile manufacturing unit in India, it's a highly modern, very sophisticated, that is, they were manufacturing parts for textile industry, called Texmaco, was promoted in Gwalior, again an independent state, Jyotirlaria Scindia's hometown. It was a princely state. Are good examples of the region. Similarly, the failed and infructuous efforts of Walchand Hirachand, person who promoted Premier Automobiles, Fiat car, to promote HAL, what is Hindustan Aeronautics, was originally intended to be a joint venture between Hirachand Walchand and Government of India to manufacture aircraft, So that was Walchand's idea. So he wanted to set it up in Bangalore, not in Bombay. He's a Bombay wala, but he wanted to set it up in Bangalore. And Premier Motors, again, initially wanted to set it up in Mysore precisely for this reason, because in Mysore, the state was prepared to give cheap loans, cheap electricity, cheap water, cheap land. So it was very attractive. Of course, it didn't work out, so he went back to Bombay. That's a different story. So what I'm saying is, I think we need to bear this in mind, the comparative perspective, and not talk about Kerala being very exceptional. Because it's argued that, the Tamilians were favored. Tamilians were not favored. The Tamilians came because they had that kind of money. Who are the people who came? Let's just quickly, I'll wind up. There are three industries: Travancore Rayons, Perumbavoor, set up by MCTM Chidambaram Chettiar. He belongs to one of the wealthiest Chettiar family, made a lot of money in Malaysia, in Burma, elsewhere. And he had that, and he controlled one of the largest banks in South India, Indian Overseas Bank, still there today. Indian Overseas Bank was controlled by this family. So they had that kind of money. So he was a very unusual kind of businessman. Rayon is a very new product in India, but he was one of those thinking businessmen. He said, no, why promote this usual textile, yarn and all that? Let me produce something different. So he chose rayon, and obviously by virtue of the fact that he's a Tamil businessman, they had access to C.P. Ramaswamy, who was also a politician from Tamil Nadu, from Chennai. So he must have said, okay, why don't you come, come to Travancore. So, but he had the resources, and he was prepared to take that risk of promoting a very capital-intensive, technology-intensive industry like Travancore Rayons in Perumbavoor. In 1945, it was promoted. Likewise, FACT, Fertilizers and Chemical Limited in Alwari, was promoted by not as big a group, but a reasonably important business group called Seychelles. They're a Tamil Brahmin group. He made all his money through electrical distribution. running a transport service and electrical distribution, and then acquired Maytool Chemicals from a Marwadi, which is producing chemicals. So we had some experience in manufacturing chemicals. So he was not a maverick in that sense, somebody who knew the industry and realized the potential of the growth for, given the fact that there was going to be enormous demand for fertilizers from the agricultural sector. As an astute businessman, he realized the potential for the growth of the fertilizer industry and chose to invest. And the interesting fact is, lastly, Travancore Cements in Kottayam was set up by SN and Shankarlinga Iyer, a Kaladikurchi Brahmin, again a fairly well-to-do group. He had already promoted a bank and had just promoted India Cements. Now, Chennai Super Kings, the company which promotes Chennai Super Kings, India Cements, was promoted by this gentleman. So they already had just got the license, and they decided that it will be advantageous to get a second license in Kottayam. So they chose to invest in Travancore. So these are the three important business groups which chose to move into India. And the interesting thing is that it's not as though they brought a fair bit of their capital. They only invested a small 10 to 20% of the capital requirements were met by them. The rest of it was provided by the Travancore state. So it was a very liberal state which, in a sense, underwrote, the financial expenditure towards these large establishments. So these are basically the points that I've made, and I would finally wind up by saying that when I meant revisit, this is what I meant by saying that we need to question some of the assumptions that have emerged from the studies, including mine. Don't take whatever I say as the last word. I mean, these are on the basis of evidence one makes certain generalizations, but the generalizations can always be questioned. So, do we or do we not, has the time come for us to really revisit the whole industrialization process in Travancore as it developed in the course of 70, 80 years, 100 years, from mid-19th century to 1947? What are the lessons that one can draw from this? Was the dominance of foreign capital over plantation and other sectors, how much did it hamper the accumulation process of the Travancorean castes who were not Vaishya but who chose to move into these? In fact, yesterday I had a very interesting discussion with my dean, and there's something which we haven't, as historians, all of us have overlooked, and I think I don't know whether I have the energy and the time to, if I was 10, 20 years younger, I would certainly have taken up, is the Abkari contracts which were secured by the Edavars. And my dean told me that only two people had cars around the turn of the century. And one was the Mahadevan royal family, and the other car was owned by this Abkari contractor, I'm forgetting his name. Chanar. So we know very little about.
Almuti Chanar obtained a car much before the Travancore royal family obtained a car.
So, but surprisingly, none of the scholars so far, I mean, all of us, me included, have not looked at this channel of accumulation through Abkari and this thing. Because I know, I've looked at the Tamil, that's the problem with me. I looked at it in Tamil Nadu, I haven't looked at it when I came to Kerala. In Tamil Nadu, yes, I have looked at it because the Nadars did make significant money through toddy tapping in the palmyra trees. And the liquor trade did provide, was a channel of capital accumulation for the Nadars in the South Tamil Nadu. But how important was it in Travancore is something which we need to, and where did this money go? Where was it invested is something which we need to. So with that I will.
That has been partially examined by Jeffrey.
What is it? Okay.
this the income, how the income obtained from liquor trade.
In Kerala?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
was getting even in decline time on this,
Then I don't.
how it was getting channeled to other areas of activity.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
sir.
I'll just quickly run through the other maps. Basically, the whole idea was just to give you an idea of what through a map, what the visually what the industrial scene in India was. The top one, these are all cotton textiles. Bombay, Ahmedabad, Kanpur, Coimbatore. These are the major, to some extent Chennai and Tirunelveli. And the green are all plantations, Travancore. This is sugar, and coal, jute and coal, tea plantation, Assam. So this gives you a distribution of foreign and Indian industrial capital in colonial India. The red is Indian capital and the blue is foreign capital. As you can see, it's more or less coterminous to that. I mean, the very strong presence of European capital in Bengal, not so strong presence in Bombay, totally absent in Ahmedabad, which is a major center. Again, strong presence in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, very strong presence. Just to give an idea of, then this is something which it's a bit crude, I mean, not, but just to give an idea of regional circuit, because you see, in the available literature, people only talk about northern India, so nobody talks about south. So I thought I should, make some attempt to identify, which are these. I'll just tell you, these are Kamas and Reddys, agrarian capitalist, shall we put it, agrarian merchant capital from Mayan. They were responsible for the industrialization in Andhra, they and the Reddys, whether it's sugar, whether it's transport, mica mines, some textiles. Then you have this, I think, the Syrian Christians, then Tiyas and Iravas, Tiyas and Malabar and Iravas. Then Gauda Saraswat Brahmins in South Canada, because the entire banking sector was controlled by 3 or 4 families. All the major banks, corporation banks, Canara Bank, Syndicate Bank, and Vijaya Bank, all these 4 major, which were eventually nationalized, were controlled by them. They were financing this entire, because, I mean, that's why I said we cannot look at Travancore in isolation, because many of these companies were also operating. Bangalore and Cochin were the 2 major ports at this time, Wayanad, for instance, was again a very important region, though it's now part of Kerala, it's part of Malabar, was a major plantation sector. So Malabar, plantations are emerging in Malabar, plantations are emerging in Coorg area, Chikmagalur, Madikere, Coorg, and you had the migration of Syrian Christian capital to these regions from here. Michael's study shows that they were moving from here. So it's very fascinating. So there was a lot happening here, by virtue of, I'm talking about the Indian capital, what is happening, the local capital in all these regions. So the purpose of this very crude map is to just give you an idea of what is happening here. There was a lot happening by virtue of economic activity, and there were local businessmen making a lot of money, through their local trade. Nadars were closely associated with Pamyara jaggery and other products. So that was the purpose of that map. Yeah, and then of course, this is the map or something to give us some idea of Travancore administration. So basically, it's just this. Thank you very much, and I hope I made some sense.
Thank you, sir. This is a time for interaction. The students and researchers can ask questions or clarifications or something. So it will be better that you can take this mic.
So my name is Sanjali. I'm second year MA student from this department. So I have mainly 3 questions. Travancore witnessed a period of modernization influenced by the West, especially the Srimulam Tirunal, who introduced many reforms. So mainly in the field of education, industries, and etc. So can you say about the influence of Srimulam Tirunal in the field of Travancore capital or the growth of Travancore?
No, I'm afraid I've not looked at that in detail.
So can you say about the influence of cooperative movements in Travancore? Cooperative societies or something else?
At this point of time, I don't know how strong the cooperative movement was in Travancore, because none of these units, I don't see many cooperative. Sorry, there's not much evidence of any cooperative units coming up at this point of time. I think it's more a post-independence.
No, there's another thing.
Basically, Professor hails from the field of economics history as well as social history. But political history, of course.
Yeah, but still, that's no excuse. I should be able to address it. I mean, it's my feeling that I've really not looked at Srimulam's work.
Regarding the
CCP.
So I heard about that Srimulam Tirunal, who really influenced or introducing many reforms in Travancore. So that's why I just want to say about something related with Srimulam Tirunal.
Absolutely.
regarding the cooperative
And
movement.
likewise, Narayana Guru also, I think, insofar as EDO is concerned, I don't think we can, or Dr. Palpu, Narayana Guru, and the influence of these castes in a sense, in uplifting these castes, in ability to making them realize their full potential so that they could emerge as entrepreneurs is something which, is worthy of further research and investigation. Sorry, Kabir.
This actually Nicholson's report on cooperation
Yeah,
came in 1904,
right.
and after that, of course, cooperative society is picked up in the Malabar area.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But in the Travancore area, we did not find any significant
I was going to say
expansion.
that because the media industry got cooperativized much earlier in Malabar area,
Yeah.
particularly not in Travancore. Oh yeah, you had some other questions.
Yeah. So the transition from agricultural economy to the cash crop economy that we can see in the Travancore area. So how you critically indicating the term colonial modernity? I want to know more about the colonial modernity in Travancore.
I'm not very clear what you mean by colonial modernity because what I've talked about.
So really, I don't understand about the term colonial modernity, so
Yeah.
I want to know more about it.
It is out of this topic.
That's a different context.
No, it's not out. No, let me answer it because I think it's a misnomer because colonialism itself implied modernization in one sense. I mean, because this emerged post-industrial revolution because the period that we're talking about is precisely the period when this is post-Renaissance, very much so. So colonialism did imply modernization in one sense, and yeah. So in a sense, I'm a bit confused by this term colonial modernity because I thought colonization implied modernization and was modern. Yeah.
So can I
Yeah.
put it? Please. Of course, these things we had discussed. But one major thing is that at that time also, even in the earlier paper, with regard to the earlier paper also, I had this doubt. That is, this is in total disregard to the business cycles. That is, if we take the business cycles from 1860 on, after 1860s we find a downcoming. Then an upcoming, very powerful upcoming taking place from 1904 and passing through the First World War and goes up to almost not even up to 1929, but even after that, because the effect of the depression came to be felt much later, but at least during the time till the time of the depression. Then a downturn, that is the cyclical behavior.
Sure.
But here, when we discuss of industrialization in Travancore during this period, we do not touch upon this cycle. That's a major lacuna which I find in almost all the papers,
Sure.
in almost all the works. Of course, in my thesis, one of the focus was on this aspect of business cycle, but I didn't go into the, the industrial area. But if we take the service sector expansion or changes in agriculture, we find this to be very important. And indirectly in my thesis, I had discussed, without mentioning those words, the different types of cycles discussed by Schumpeter, the quadrative, the juggler, the Kitchener, how all these have its impact. So that is one major lacuna. Second is the role of the reform movements. That is, you told that you mentioned about the Mangombaswamis getting into this. It is around the same time that Malabar, the Desamangalathamana, and Brahmins of Malabar also turned to tile factories, then to rice trade, and so on. And if you go by the back issues of Germany, which was the mouthpiece of the landlords of Malabar, they speak from the beginning of the 20th century, they call upon their followers, their castemen, to enter into industries. There is that. Of course, with regard to the Syrian Christian capital also, each caste was vying each other, castes were vying each other for attaining economic superiority, and this meant major investments made in the field of industries. And in 1904, I think the SNDP conducted an industrial exhibition and called upon the Erovers to come to industry, to the industrial sector on a large scale. It was at that stage that Sri Namalu told that there shall no more be any temples, but what we need are industries.
That's the point I was making in the context of modernity.
Yeah. So how that had, how these, and also we find the role of banks coming up. From 1904 on, we find the expansion of the banking system. And the one peculiarity was that even during the depression, the banks did not fail. Unlike in the Madras presidents, banks here did not fail. Then during the 1930s, we find the cashew industry flourishing. Despite depression, how could the cashew industry flourish during the period? So these are some of the doubts that come to my mind, and also the okay, with regard to this absence of a trading caste, you might be knowing that. There is an interesting observation in one of the, I think in 1911, census report, Travancore census report. That function precedes organization. Interesting comment. So that's really a casual story. Okay, thank you.
So others may also have their.
We'll talk about it later.
Okay, okay, that's fantastic.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm myself Ashwati Babu, research scholar, Department of History, University College. Sir, I have two questions. Sir, you stated that there was absence of Vaishya caste in Kerala, and this gave opportunity for Eidavas and Syrian Christian communities.
And Muslims.
And I doubt how far these opportunities gave social mobilities to these communities. And we told about Al-Mutal Channel, they had faced several caste disabilities. And from this point of view, I think these opportunities didn't give much social mobility to them. And second question, one of the most important advantage of Travancore was its geographical position. And whether we, my question is whether we had utilized this geographical advantage during our industrialization process. Thank you. Further question?
Shall I answer Ashwati first and then take it all together? Whatever. Oh, yes.
Answer ചെയ്തിട്ട് പറയുന്നതാണ്.
So, yeah, when I talked about absence of Vaishya caste, what I meant was in relation to other regions who were able to, in a sense, play a significant role as merchants and bankers mobilizing capital. You don't have that kind of situation obtaining in Travancore. So I said that void was filled up by Eidavars and Syrian Christians, not deliberately, but by virtue of the fact that they were associated with industries which gave them an opportunity to accumulate capital. Oil industry, for instance, or coconut oil. In the case of Syrian Christians, the plantation, commercial agriculture and plantation. That's what I meant. As far as social mobility, yes, surely. That alone may not have provided social mobility. But certainly, I mean, the opportunity to accumulate wealth would have over time helped them to overcome some of the problems together with, but this can't be seen independent of the social reform movement which was also happening alongside. That played a much more important role in addressing the question of social mobility than the economic. Economic must have, but all of them did not have similar opportunities. After all, Eidavars was also a differentiated, each and every community was differentiated. I mean, for the sake of convenience we say Eidavar, for the sake of convenience we say Syrian Christian, but these are highly differentiated communities. Some sections had greater opportunity for social mobility, others much less, and that's where the role of social reform movement becomes very critical, number one. As far as the locational advantage of geographical locational advantage, yes, I mean access to overseas market was there. That's why when I said that in some sense the Travancore case was very unique and exceptional, because from beginning it was an export-oriented economy, and what starting from C.P. Ramaswamy and the Divans of that time tried to do, and possibly I don't know, it's only a counterfactual issue which I can raise. Did they make a mistake in setting up import substituting industrialization in an economy which was essentially export-oriented? All these cement factories and setting up Travancore rayons, instead of that, if they focused on, because as you said, to take your argument that one of the factors that Kerala enjoyed was this locational advantage. It had so many ports, extending from, if you include Malabar post-unification, so many ports along the coast. And it was traditionally an export-oriented economy. Even in the medieval period, I mean, all these people, trading companies came basically for the spices of Kerala. So Kerala had a long history of maritime, trade with various countries. So that's my point. So who stood to gain by locational advantage? Did the Edavars and Syrian Christians gain, or did only the British gain? Is the question that I would pose with reference to the locational question. Yeah. I hope I've answered you.
Yes, sir. Myself, Neetu, research scholar from University of Calicut. My question regarding the industrialization is that is this a byproduct of middle class or colonial intervention in Travancore? And the second one is, why did the Edava community not get this social status that the Syrian Christians get in Travancore? Because they played a vital role in revealing the absence of Vaishya community in Travancore. Then why they didn't get the social status compared to these Syrian Christians in Travancore society? And next one is, how was the response or consciousness of common people towards the implementation of industrialization and its norms in Travancore? Because that time society is constrained with the boundaries of caste. So how was the response of common people towards industrialization in Travancore?
Very good question. I'm sorry, I may not have complete answers to all these questions because, for one, whether it's you said whether it's a middle class, whether industrialization in Travancore is a middle class concept or notion, is that the question you said? I don't know what's so middle class about it because
in your talk you mentioned about the importance of non-Malayalis. You mentioned of non-Malayalis into the industrialization of Travancore. So is this a byproduct of middle class people of?
when I meant non-Malayalis, I meant the foreign capital was also non-Malayali in one sense, they controlled. But you are also non-Malayali in the sense, non-Travancorean. I said I didn't use the word non-Malayali because it's more appropriate to use the word non-Malayali after 56 when there is unification of Malabar, Cochin, and so I use the word non-Travancorean. To distinguish Edavars, Syrian Christian and Nayars and other Muslims, local indigenous businessmen from those investing from outside, whether they were Tamil, whether they were Gujaratis who came in and invested in. And of course, it was in that sense I meant. What was the other question? It's about
how was the response or consciousness of common people towards the implementation of industrialization?